Before we start the proceedings, I just want to make sure that everybody understands what the context is here. And it's a reminder from the email that I'd sent out. So the Ceph Foundation board has initiated a survey, a user survey, to gather more concerted feedback. The idea is for some of the user community to get together and lead some focus topics in terms of areas that Ceph can improve in. The first two topics and first two champions in this direction have been performance and usability slash consumability, which is why the survey has been designed to get more feedback in those areas. But future surveys, if we have more champions of areas that people want to improve Ceph in, we can have surveys that could be more focused. So yeah, the idea is that if you want other areas to be the focus for Ceph, then we can have future surveys and leaders who can lead those topics. But to begin with, we are going to be focusing on consumability and performance. So today, the idea is to go over some of those results, and at a later point, we are going to be, taking action items around like what can be done in the short term and what can be done in the long term around those. So that's the context. And over to you, Laura.
Thanks. So let me share the results that we have from the survey. I'm going to share my screen. So yeah, this is the overview of some metrics we collected from the Ceph users feedback survey. And as Neha said, we've currently have two focus topics or two focus champion groups that we're focused on for now. And these include performance and usability. And the usability section kind of encompasses how orchestration works and all of that. So this first section, the survey was divided into two sections, and today we have 27 responses from a variety of people. And I'll just kind of highlight the most important pieces of kind of each question. So this first section was based on all around performance questions. And we asked people, what are your workloads on Ceph? And people could select more than one. So the highest ones were backup and archive and persistent containers. And what does that say? And Kubernetes. Those were the top two. And another top one was Elasticsearch ELK. So here we can get a picture of what people are using their workloads on Ceph for. And I'll say too, in this snapshot, we're seeing things kind of in an aggregated way, but we also are able to see on a more fine-grained way in a Google sheet, like if people are using RBD or Cephfs, and then how that correlates to what their workloads are. And then for this next question, we asked, what data protection techniques do you use? And here we got people could select one or both, or neither, but it would have to be one or the other, but replication or erasure coding in their clusters. So we got a good picture of most people are using replication, but it's about equally divided, and we are able to see on a finer grain level who's using both and one or the other. And here we also asked people, what is your EC profile? And we got a lot of standard responses, 4+2, 8+3, and some of these are aggregated by a lot of people, but and here's we made it a bit open-ended, and we got some nice answers. Like this person included a longer answer, a more detailed answer, and their EC profile. But here we can get a sense of what people are mostly using, and then we can also connect that again back to like their workload, what they chose in the first question. And what is your EC plugin? We got a lot of good answers here. So the defaults that Ceph offers are Erasure and Reed Solomon Vandermond, and we had a lot of people answer Erasure and Reed Solomon and ESA as well. So we have had some questions about whether people are using non-default Ceph EC plugins, and it looks like not so much. So that told us something there. And we also asked people, what are your replicas, if they had selected replica, and we mostly got 3 and 4, pretty standard answers there. Um, and then the next question, we asked people a bit more open-ended, please describe your network configuration. So this, we got quite a variety of answers, but this will just help us to narrow down more specific questions in the future. So that's why we cast kind of a broad net here. But we got quite a lot of answers about people's network configuration. Yeah, quite a variety. What are the latency and IOPS requirements in your environment? Again, kind of a broader net question. We had some people specify, 4K RAN read write 20 milliseconds. So that's more of like a specific answer. Um, oh yeah, and then we had some people write for block. We are more IOPS and latency, I guess, and more block. We aim to be below. So people were kind of specifying like what workload they had and what kind of latency and IOPS requirements corresponded to that. Again, an open-ended question, but we got kind of a good picture of what people require in their systems.
Did you lose my sharing? If I change my tab, just a quick question, Laura. I wanted to say something here.
Oh yeah, no, I still see it.
Okay. So what I wanted to say here is like here is where you'll start to see some of those performance related questions come in into the survey. And what Laura is calling a wide net. We just wanted to get a sense of like what the community cares about, and I think we've gotten a good picture of a mix of everything, right? Like there are some people who have come and said that they have no requirements per se, but lower is always better. So that's obvious, right? But then some have come with more harder requirements in terms of like what they care about. They care about IOPS more than latency for their workload, which is good feedback, right? So this is the kind of stuff we wanted to get a sense of in the first survey, especially for the performance related questions. We've gotten a lot of open-ended answers, and I think we can narrow this down to even further to group some of these requirements that our users have. That's all I wanted to say. Keep going.
Yeah, exactly. So the next question, does Ceph maintain consistent performance in the non-error scenario? So let's see, what was this one? Um,
It's basically good state, right? Like, so non-error state is like, okay, in a happy path, how is Seth doing? So some people have just said yes, and some people it's not applicable, I guess, but some people have said they have had pretty good experience. Some say reasonable, some say it errors out at a particular limit. So again, a mix of things, and there are some people who've given some more concerted feedback around issues with the PG peering, right, being slow in scenarios. But then again, PG peering is probably not considered happy path, but we do understand that there are certain things that are enabled by default in the Ceph cluster, which lead to peering happening. So that might be, a feedback to take for us.
Yeah, and we did see a lot, some trends about peering and backfilling in these answers, and how people would like to see improvement around there. So that was particularly helpful to see.
Yeah. So
Um,
with the non-error scenario, I think there's some specific use cases that people have talked about like slow RBD mirroring in some scenarios. Um, it's performing well in non-failure scenarios, which is good, and we have somebody is doing backups and they have no complaints. But I guess this is going to be more interesting, the error scenarios bit, right? Let's jump into
yeah,
that.
how does it change during the error scenarios? So we this, or if you scroll up a bit, um, Neha in there. Yeah. There was one response. There's been a big improvement with heavy rebalance scenarios. We're no longer afraid about that. So that's good news to hear. Um, when somebody says when one OSD is down, the cluster disconnects. So that doesn't sound so good, but that it's a bit vague, but still gives us an idea of what customers are concerned about. Um, we also had some feedback about MClock. With MClock, we had issues at the beginning, but there should be a way to promote client or recovery backfill with more flags. Um, yeah, more about recovery backfill. So we really did get some good feedback here about um, MClock and how we can improve around that. And we also, somebody's talking about Ceph loses availability in certain conditions. And that is something that we are focused on for the next version, adding a metric around Ceph availability. So that's good to see that customers are also concerned about that. Network issues, yeah. So we got, again, a variety of comments here, and all are pretty interesting.
Yeah, I
And
think if you look at there's like a theme, right? Like people have previously seen issues more with rebalancing and recovery in general, which some tend to agree that it has improved. But there are areas that they're still talking about, like snap trimming and peering, for example, causing latencies. Those are still like in the pipeline to be improved, right? So I mean, I think that resonates with what we are also trying to do in the dev side.
yes, backfill, another comment about backfill can take a long time. So yeah, a lot of good feedback there.
Okay.
So the next one, what tools or telemetry do you normally use to debug Ceph performance issues? Um, this was interesting to see. We had a lot of people mention Prometheus, Ceph Exporter, Node Exporter, Grafana, and so yeah, this gives us kind of an idea of how people are uh, just troubleshooting performance issues in their Ceph clusters beyond what the Ceph cluster itself can offer, warnings wise and via the commands. So yeah, that's and also somebody mentioned the Ceph dashboard and the alerts manager module, so we can see that those pieces are um, much used by the Ceph community. Describe your best practices for Ceph performance tuning. Um, so a lot of people actually mentioned that they read the Ceph users mailing list for performance tuning best practices. Um, and other people said that it would be better if we had documentation for this. So that kind of tells us that a lot of people are finding advice in forums and that they would like to see more documentation. So that gives us kind of a an area to go forward to focus on with how we can improve the documentation around performance tuning. And we do have a lot of blog posts about this, but not necessarily documentation. So, um, we want users to be reading this stuff, and if it needs to be in the documentation, then that's something we'll have a conversation about. And some people put like their own individual tuning techniques that they've come up with over the years. So that's kind of interesting to see. Yep, we set they say set tune profile, most things work out of the box. Yeah, so we got some responses from people just kind of talking about their experience with their personal workload and setup.
Yeah, I think the only one that we don't want to hear is this, right? Trial and error. So I think this is what we have to work towards. Anyway, okay.
Yes. So that was the last performance related question. And then the next section of this was
I
about,
guess let's maybe give folks a chance to talk if they have
oh,
any
sure.
question, any areas that, yeah, we are kind of in the middle of the review of the survey. So if there are questions for performance, let's talk about them, or we can take them at the end if that is preferred. I'm not hearing anything. So, okay, let's keep going with orchestration and deployment. So, this is the second theme that I mentioned that, from the Ceph Foundation, um, Bloomberg and Matt have decided to lead. So, I feel like there are a lot more actionable things that we saw in the survey. Maybe our questions were more direct in this, but let's see what everybody else has to say.
All right. And Matt Leonard said, yeah, we did. Did you have questions or I just want to make sure?
No, I was saying, yes, we did put this part in the survey.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah,
So,
I think Matt, you joined probably a few minutes late. I just set context for the community, right? This is driven by the foundation, and we have two champions for performance and usability and consumability. And so the second champion is you guys. And now we're going to be talking about the areas that the community feels we need to do more work on. So it's perfect timing to have you on the call.
yeah.
Over to you.
So the first question we asked is, what is your deployment target? And people could give answers such as containers, Ceph ADM or Rook, or bare metal we were interested in. So the top ones were bare metal and what's that red piece?
So this is
Yeah,
Ceph ADM.
containers, Ceph ADM and Rook. Yeah. So
And then there are a little bit of containers on top of OS on bare metal as well. And here some folks say they have both. There's also containers with Ceph Ansible. Again, both Ceph ADM and Proxmox. Again, containers. So I feel like the top part is only containers plus containers and something else. And this talks about the bare metal population.
yeah,
That's my inference.
yeah. So we've got a lot of orchestration and but still a fair amount of bare metal people reported. And what is your orchestration system was the next question we asked. So the top one was Ceph ADM, and the second one was Ceph Ansible. And then we had a variety of other. And I know some person mentioned Salt, which is note not as highly used, but that gives us a good answer of that people are mostly using Ceph Ansible and Ceph ADM for their orchestration systems.
Those
And
numbers don't make sense. If you go back up to the previous one, the
Mhm.
majority of people say they're using RPMs binary. Ceph ADM doesn't work with RPMs in binary, but yet when you go to the orchestration part, the largest answer is Ceph ADM, and Ceph Ansible is the second largest, but the sheer number doesn't work out. If you're doing a bare metal deployment, you have to use Ceph ADM, or you have to use Ceph Ansible or some sort of other thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like the answers to those two questions tie out with each other. You would kind of expect the layout to be the same.
Yeah.
I think 27 responses is very little to come to really good conclusions regarding the percentage here between containers and containers and Ansible and Ceph ADM.
Right. And a lot of this here also has an overlap, right? If you look at it. So maybe that's skewing it. But like, if you really want to drill down which of these users are using Ceph ADM versus something else, that can be done, right? We have the raw results to go over and map each of these to this and figure out.
That's fine. I just wanted
Yeah.
to call out that I would have expected those two graphs to look similar to each other, just given that Ceph ADM does not support RPMs.
Mhm.
yeah, and that's the good that we can draw that inference and then drill down deeper into the raw results for that. The next question was we asked people, what do you like about your orchestrator, for example, Ceph ADM? And most of the answers were just that they like how automated it makes the process. It makes it easy, it covers iterative tasks. Um, they don't need to learn and deploy entirely new tech. It makes updates and upgrades fast and easy. So that's what we like to see: simplicity, um, scalable configuration. So this is the good feedback part. So there is negative feedback later on, but it's good to see that it's helping people. And then we can map also these answers back to, like, somebody is talking about what they like about Ceph Ansible. We can map that back to in the finer grained results, what they answered for what orchestration system do they use. And then the next one, what do you not like about your orchestrator? So I remember there being a few answers about Rook. So that Rook could use a few of Ceph ADM's features. Rook is too simplistic. So it looks like people are looking for Rook to perform more like Ceph ADM in some areas. People were mentioning the dashboard has lost some functionality.
Yeah, I think
And
this is one that stood out to me, not being able to see status and logs inside containers. I've heard this from other users too. So this might be an area that could use improvements in general. Like how
yes,
do we just make like the default way Ceph operates to just log inside wherever it's running?
right. And then another one was it's difficult to change the behavior when functionality is not present, i.e., extendability. So it looks like people would like to change, add something on if it's not present, and they find that they're not able to do that. Um, Confusing documentation, so that's something that we can definitely focus on. Ceph Ansible is no longer community recommended, maintained. Errors are hard to decipher. I'm not quite sure how we would handle that as much, but it's still good to know. Um, yeah, certain things are difficult to debug. So that just kind of tells us that we need work on our documentation and logging, default logging for people. Um,
Right.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if there's anything else you want to call out about that, Neha, but
No, that's why I feel like these are a few things that we can definitely go look at and improve experience for our users, right? So, um, but yeah, I think in the interest of time, we can keep going and we can drill down more at a later point.
so the next one was, what does your orchestrator not do that you would like it to do? Um, and people mentioned that they like it to be more intuitive in its commands. So uh, they've written a couple of examples, but the feedback is just that commands could be a bit more intuitive and not so maybe long and verbose. And we had two of those responses at least. Um, so that's something that we can focus on. Um, what's this one? Telemetry should be set up so it can be copy pasted on request. Okay, so it looks like they want
Right.
telemetry from their orchestrator to be more easily accessible.
Right.
Be able to use a separate monitor disk with the spec file like OSDs. So this person has some feedback about how they can have better configuration options. Uh, yeah,
And these are
so
like general topic support for Samba, support for multi-site correctly outside the box. So I think some of these areas are areas that our dev teams are working on. So it's kind of reassuring to them too that the community cares about that.
yes.
Okay, somebody talks about make it easy to day two operations.
Yeah, and then we did have a few people say that
Answer coffee.
yeah.
Coffee is the answer to everything.
Uh,
All right.
yeah. So yeah, better. And I see another one that seems to be like better ways to configure their setup. So yeah, OSD specification could be made more versatile. Oh yeah, this one stood out to me. The Ceph or PS command output is sometimes outdated, and it can take several minutes until the orchestrator updates the PS output. I don't know if this is explicitly related, but I've seen a lot of tests in our uh, orchestrator tests hang on that Ceph or PS command. So we may have some testing that covers that where we can focus on improving that command. But
Yeah.
obviously, that would be something to ask the org team, but just something that I noticed from reviewing QA runs.
This is another feature that could be helpful.
Yeah.
I know we talked a little bit about some of this in terms of versioning and stuff with the orchestrator team, but seems like this is another useful piece that can be added as a feature. So I guess that's the overall theme, right? There are kind of small feature requests and improvements that we can do based on the feedback that we've gathered in this particular section.
The next one is, what does your orchestration system do that you would like to stop doing? And a lot of people said nothing, but there was one person that said changing crush rules. So that's maybe something that the core team could look into. There was, if you go down a bit more, when containers enter an error state, they sort of stick there. So that's something that could be improved upon. I don't like the automatically grab all available drives in the system and add to Ceph thing. Lots of checks should be possible to skip by. Oh, and then this one, silent failures, stood out to me. So it looks like people may be experiencing failures in their orchestration system that could be better designed to alert them, and it's kind of falling into the background. Yeah, so we got a lot of answers that there's nothing that people could improve, but we did have a few things that could be improved there. Does anybody have any questions about, so the next section is kind of a third optional section. So I'll stop here and just ask if there are any questions about the orchestration system or section rather. Okay, if not, we can then just move on to the optional information. So here we asked some questions about people's Ceph installations, like what versions they're running. And people could choose more than one. So if you go into the finer grain results, you can see people that have mixed clusters. But the highest ones were Quincy and Pacific. So that checks out from what we've seen, of course. And it's good to see that more people are picking up Reef as well. Interesting that some people are still using Luminous and Mimic and Nautilus, but hopefully they'll upgrade at some point. But I maybe another question is, why do you choose not to upgrade? We can add that question. Why haven't you upgraded yet if you're on an older version? That'd be interesting to know. So how many Ceph clusters make up your installation? So here we provided people like a buckets where they could choose of numbers, and the top one was 0 to 10 Ceph clusters make up their installations. And then the second highest ones were 10 to 20 and 20 to 100. And then we do have, how many people responded 100 plus?
There's one
Just
cluster.
One. Okay. So yeah, one cluster that has 100 plus in their installation. So that generally checks out, but very good to see. What is the total amount of raw capacity deployed? So the top one we have is 1 petabyte to 50 petabytes. And then the second highest is 100 terabytes to 1 petabyte. The next one is 50 plus petabytes. So we did have 3 people say that, which is interesting. And then the last 2 were smaller deployments. So we did have that top number be on the higher end of capacity deployed. And then we asked, what is your deployment? So people could select more than one. So we'd have to go into the finer grain results to see people that selected both. But we have most people selecting bare metal, and then a little bit less, but still a fair amount selecting containers. So I think that kind of checks out, right, Neha, with the question we asked before that was similar. Yeah. And then, so the next one we asked was which workloads are in use. So this is interesting to see, connecting it back to all the prior questions. And again, people could select more than one, but we have most using block RBD, second using RGW, and then file system. And then we did have 3 responses say direct liberatos. So this just gives us a good idea of, like, if people are complaining about something performance wise, we can trace that back to what workloads are in use for them and see how that connects. And then we asked, what is the criticality of your Ceph deployment? So most people did say that it's mission business critical. And the next, people also said non-critical, but that was a much smaller percentage, only 2 responses.
So this is good feedback, right? Like people who really care about their data and have mission critical business are using Ceph, and that's the majority. I wouldn't even like 2 is not representative of much of the non-critical business, and there's no value add business that people are doing with it. So we have more responsibility in our hands, is what the summary is here.
Yes. And then do you run with Ceph telemetry on? That's 50% exactly. 50% say yes, 50% say no. I think in a subsequent survey, we could ask why, if you choose to have it off, why do you have it off? Because I know Yarit's always asking questions about how we can improve improve it so people feel like they can opt in. I wonder if there was a question of air-gapped clusters that can opt in, and also maybe people could be worried about privacy. So that's something that we can expand on in a future survey.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that this already tells a story, right? Like I don't think we had 50-50 split between telemetry on and off. Plus, I remember seeing one question where somebody said, I would like to send telemetry, but in an offline manner. So we can get this yes to grow if we make some more improvements. And, we've already been talking about the value addition that telemetry brings to users. So I foresee this trend changing. But this is good. It's a good direction to go in.
Yes. And then the last question we asked is, what is your Ceph cluster outage tolerance? And most people said flexible outage tolerance. And then next they said 0 outage tolerance. So that's kind of interesting to see both ends of the poll were equal in that sense. And then we had some mixed answers for the second 2. So 4 times 9 seconds of uptime, 1 hour per year, and then the 9 seconds of uptime, 31 seconds per year for the least amount of responses. So
And this is where you mentioned briefly, Laura, that we are trying to add a measure of availability for Ceph in terms of capturing that by means of Ceph itself. So that should also help, and if we can capture that using telemetry, that should give us a good picture of how Ceph's availability is looking in the community overall in terms of a particular metric.
yes. So yeah, that's the last question here. And what we plan to do with this is is present the results on it's at Ceph Day in New York, which is already coming up next week. And we'll just go over these results and also our workflow for collecting this information. And we'll also, be explaining that we have the two categories right now, performance and orchestration usability, and talk about that we do want to grow that in the future, and get more people involved to be champions of individual groups that they'd like to get feedback on. So does anybody have any questions about any of this, the process, the questions that we asked, the feedback? And also I'll say, like, if you have any feedback for ways or questions that you'd like us to add in future surveys, that would be really helpful to hear. And again, we have Matt Leonard, who's leading the orchestration usability side of things. So you can talk to us, but also talk to him about questions you'd like to see. And Vincent, who is also leading the performance side of things. So you can talk to him about what you'd like to see more questions about regarding performance. Sebastian said maybe SSD versus NVMe versus HDD. Yeah, that's a good idea for sure. We could definitely add that in. And we could phrase it as just asking a question, what do you use, and letting people choose one or both or all, that kind of a thing. All right. If there are no questions, thanks for listening and for being here during this dry run of us presenting the results. And maybe some of you will be at Ceph Day in New York, where we're presenting all this in greater detail.
Yeah, I had a question. For the presentation at Ceph Day, are we going to walk through it like this, or are we planning to consolidate the results a little bit better into themes? Because I think most of the questions, instead of reading through all of that stuff, there's probably fairly good, strong themes that we could pull out and keep it more high level.
Yep.
Yeah, so I've been putting together some slides for that. And I thought what we could do is, pull out the responses that we'd like to highlight in certain slides. And then I'll send that to you and Vincent so that you guys can help edit that. But I'm working on getting the bare bones of that down. So you should see that soon.
All right. And Casey, you wanted to say something too.
Hey, yeah. Just kind of a comment that it seems like the survey has such a small sample size. So I'd be interested to think of more ways that we can get more participation. Like, where are we advertising this? How do we get feedback from more of the users?
Yep. That's a very good point, Casey. And I think we opened the survey for like a week or something, maybe a few more days because it wasn't closed. So we got some 27 folks to respond, but it was mostly using our mailing list. I think we now have a Linux Foundation person who's going to help us with our social media presence and stuff. So going forward, we can use their help to reach out to more of the community members who are not following just mailing lists. And there's also the part about highlighting some of the benefits of this. So sharing the feedback here in this forum, and also consolidating the results, and even the Ceph Days presentation will be shared with the community. So therefore, there'll be more encouragement for people to take this survey and see, and participate essentially, right? Improving Ceph. So I think we have to do a push for it, and each one of us can do it in a small little way.
I think there's two things we could do, and maybe we could take this back to the board. But at events, if we had a way to have people answer this survey at events, that might be easy, right? Like if we just had an iPad, like take 5 minutes and fill this out. Also, if this doesn't, like the goal is that this isn't a one-off, but this is a recurring thing. If at events we can show this was your feedback and here are the things that have gone into the next Ceph release that directly address this, then that gives people the sense that this isn't just a waste of time. I think those two things, which are a little bit more forward-looking, would also help encouraging people to contribute to this, right?
Absolutely.
In the past, I think there have been discussions around the Ceph dashboard having like a news or announcements page. That might be a good way to advertise when surveys are happening.
Yeah, I remember that discussion at the CLT. So I mean, I think we have some good ideas here, and I also want to take this feedback. I know a lot of the CLT members are on this call, but for folks who are not on this call, I would like to take the message to them too. because at the end of the day, it's about closing some of these loops, right? There are some broad items, and there are some little things that we can definitely change in the next release, for example, right? So we have to create an ecosystem around like getting the feedback, doing these surveys, and taking back to the technical team to address and prioritize at their end, and then ship it in a product, like in a release at some point. And that's what Matt is talking about. Like people should see value in taking this survey by closing some of these loops. So I think we have to encourage both the user side to be more vocal about their feedback and the dev side to appropriately address some of this feedback as we go forward with this. But I think if everybody agrees this is a good initiative, then let's spread the word and get more people to get involved in taking these surveys. We need more sample space, like we talked about. So that's I think step one. But whatever we have is still useful. Therefore, we want to still talk about it.
I have, sorry, just another question that pops into my head. It looks like we got almost 30 responses, and we're collectively saying that that's a small sample size. Do we actually have a sample of the sample size? Like, how many large corporations or large users of Ceph actually exist in the world? Do we know the answer to that?
I mean, if we have ways to infer that in terms of telemetry, in terms of previous. So this was more a concerted feedback around performance and orchestration, but we have done user surveys that from the community standpoint about like, hey, what is your experience with Ceph, and like how many clusters do you have? So those general surveys have gone out where the sample space has been larger than this, because we've kept the survey out for longer, publicized it much more. So in that
What
respect,
was the sample size though? Like, are we orders of magnitudes off, or just?
it was probably in hundreds, right? Like it's in the order of hundreds, I would say.
Gotcha. Okay, so it is quite a big difference.
Yes, so I think that's where a lot of the feedback that we've probably gotten are the vocal part of the community, right? How do we get the non-vocal part of the community, who we see in telemetry, for example, to speak about some of these things is the challenge. Yes, Casey, you have something?
Yeah, just kind of another dimension of the low sample size is that we have some pie charts and we're kind of looking at statistics, but especially seeing the chart about people on really old Ceph versions, I think that's going to bias a lot of the stuff about containers versus packages. And it occurs to me that we collect data from telemetry, so it might be interesting to correlate the statistics that we get from telemetry on those same things so that we can compare them with what people are reporting in the survey.
Yep, that's a good point. That's definitely something we can do.
Yeah, I love the idea of using data to kind of direct our efforts, but we want to make sure that it's good data.
Yeah, and as Neha said, I think it does kind of work out that we had this survey first rather than, because we would like to plan future surveys, and this one kind of informed us of how we can better phrase certain questions and make them more, like we had some people confused by, like one of the questions, can phrase that more accurately, so then when we send this out a second or a third or fourth time, we can gear up on getting a wider audience, but then we'll also have our best foot forward about the survey that we're actually presenting people. So this kind of worked out as a dry, not quite a dry run, but something that we can use to inform our where we're jumping off, and then how we're designing these surveys.
All right.
Any more questions or comments? If not, I think we can.
How many of the users here have taken the survey is my question.
There's two people from Bloomberg here. Joe's the one that filled it in, but both of us are here.
Neha, do you remember which mailing list this was sent out to? Was it just the dev and
user
or
and
the user list? Okay.
Yep, just the Ceph users and Ceph.
But the board knew about it too, because it went through the board. So basically, all of the mailing lists knew.
Right.
We are also hoping that as we get more champions for individual topics, that these champions will kind of know their audience and be able to send the survey to like high-profile users that they know would like to get feedback from. Like if Vincent knows somebody that hasn't taken the survey yet, or Matt, if you would know people at Bloomberg or elsewhere that would be good to take the survey. That's not something that will increase numbers per se, but increase the responses that we really want to see.
Right. And again, we have not technically closed the survey, so any feedback is good feedback. We have a lot of people in the call here. If you can spread the word, we can maybe by next week get much more responses and start, step by step. So all the users on this call who haven't taken the survey, just take it and let's try to get some meaningful progress going. There's no objection.
Thanks everybody for being here and
for all the good feedback people had. Thank you for joining.